Hey guys, alright? Welcome everyone. We start by meeting a boy named Pete, who is reading a book about the adventures of a boy with his dog Elliot while traveling with his family. When a deer enters the road and his father has to make a sudden maneuver, causing an accident and flipping the car. As the sole survivor, Pete grabs the book, puts it in his backpack, and starts walking through the forest, but soon he is surrounded by a pack of wolves. About to become the wolves' lunch, a gigantic and totally bizarre dragon arrives, scaring the other animals and saving Pete from being devoured. Quite brave, the boy asks if the creature intends to eat him and, upon discovering that it doesn't, he names the monster Elliot, his new best friend. Feeling a special bond, the dragon allows the human to touch him and offers his paw for him to climb, and then safely takes Pete to his den. 6 years later, a man named Mitchell claims to have seen a dragon in the forest and begins to tell everyone he knows, but since the only people who believe him are children, the old man takes the opportunity to add to the story, making him seem like a great hero. As Mitchell finishes the story, his daughter Grace appears and reassures the youngsters, saying that, thanks to her work as a forest ranger, she frequents the forest practically every day and has never seen anything remotely resembling a dragon. After his daughter leaves, Mitchell reaffirms that the dragon is in the forest and says that it only appears to those who believe, leaving the children very excited. In the forest, Pete, who is now 11 years old, finds a small rabbit on the edge of the stream. A brown bear appears, and the boy confronts the animal to save the little rabbit. In the background, Elliot hears the boy's cries and leaves his den to see what is happening, causing the big bear to give up any attack and leave. After that, they decide to play hide and seek, and Elliot makes his body invisible. Managing to find the dragon, the boy gives up the game and runs toward the cliff along with Elliot, being caught during the fall and flying over the forest with his companion. After a not-so-smooth landing, the green dragon starts chasing his own tail while Pete climbs the tree that protects the den where they live, howling at the sunset as he reaches the top with no memory of his life and civilization. Pete sits next to Elliot, and the two spend the night looking at the stars, enjoying all the freedom the forest provides them. The next morning, the pair flies through the forest until the dragon finds a fallen tree and decides to take it home. However, as they try to pass through the forest with a piece of wood, Elliot senses Grace's presence and decides to hide, leaving his body completely invisible, while Pete follows her from afar, hiding in his own way. Walking around the area, Grace sees some trees marked by loggers and begins to remove the markings, signaling that they do not have permission to cut them down. While Grace works on the logs, Pete sees a compass in her bag and decides to take advantage of the distraction to steal it, but makes noise when returning to the bushes and almost gets caught in the act. At that moment, another guard approaches, saying he wants to leave and asks if Grace has finished, distracting her and saving Pete from being discovered. Before leaving, the woman picks up the key to one of the backhoes and throws it on the ground, causing the loggers to have to look for the object before they can start working. As the guards leave, Pete goes to the road and picks up the key from the ground. He hands the object and the compass for Elliot to smell, but the items are so dusty that the dragon ends up sneezing, leaving the boy's body all messy. The next morning, the two are sleeping in the den when Pete wakes up to the sound of chainsaws in the background. Since he's never heard anything like it before, the young man decides to investigate and finds a group of loggers cutting down trees. Hiding to observe the humans, one of the workers goes to Gavin and asks if they have permission to collect firewood in this area, but the man simply ignores him and tells him to get back to work. Shortly afterward, Grace also arrives at the scene and begins to question Jack, her fiancé and leader of the logging team, as well as Gavin's older brother. Furious, the woman starts arguing with her boyfriend because they are working in a forbidden place. This distracts him, so his daughter goes alone to the edge of the forest. When Pete sees someone his own size for the first time, he is delighted, but is discovered by Natalie, who runs after him to try to make friends. Hiding behind a log, the boy ends up making noise and needs to run, climbing the tree at a surreal speed. Even surprised, Natalie keeps chasing the boy and decides to try climbing like him, but she's not as skilled and ends up slipping, letting out a scream so loud it catches the attention of the loggers. Trying to save her, Pete jumps from the branch and tries to pull Natalie with all his strength, but they both fall freely. Fortunately, Pete manages to grab onto a log and holds onto Natalie, saving her from the terrible fall. When they reach the ground, the girl asks Pete how old he is, and since he has no idea of his age, he claims he's still 5 years old, even though she finds it strange. The girl accepts the answer and starts introducing herself, but they are soon interrupted by Jack and the loggers, who arrive wanting to know what happened. Upon learning that his daughter fell from the tree, the leader of the workers asks what she was doing up there, and Natalie tells about Pete, revealing the location of the boy who was hiding. Seeing the little Tarzan, Grace tries to reassure him and asks several questions about his family, but notices his compass on Pete's neck and gets too close, scaring the boy, who runs away frightened. During the escape, Pete bumps into Gavin and tries to climb one of the trees to escape, but the man pulls the boy by his clothes and knocks him to the ground, causing him to hit his head and faint. At that moment, Elliot wakes up with the noise and starts sniffing Pete's footprints, finding the logger's workplace. While listening to the humans' conversation, Elliot hears Gavin mentioning Pete's name and decides to lean on a tree trunk to listen better, but the tree can't bear his weight and ends up falling, nearly hitting the workers, who notice his presence and decide to hunt him down in the dense forest. The dragon tries to remain camouflaged while the loggers stop a few meters away to track his footprints, but since the creature can become invisible, they have no chance of finding him. At the hospital, Pete wakes up very confused and starts listening to the conversation between Grace and the police outside, but soon realizes they have no intention of freeing him and decides to escape alone, opening the window and escaping just as Natalie tries to enter the room. Scared, the boy runs through the streets looking for Elliot and ends up bumping into a dog that starts barking at him, but Pete is not intimidated and barks back, growling until the poor dog retreats. A few meters ahead, the boy bumps into a police car that tries to stop him, but Pete is determined to return to Elliot and climbs onto a school bus that passes by, hitching a ride with the vehicle full of students. From the top of the bus, Pete looks at the horizon trying to find the location of his den, but can't find it and decides to jump onto the roof of another car, coming across a dead end. With the boy cornered, Grace approaches and manages to grab him, taking the boy to the police station, even though he shows fierceness. After talking to the sheriff, Jack's fiancée and daughter get into the car and start taking Pete home, assuming the responsibility of keeping him safe until everything is cleared up and his parents are located, but the boy wastes no time and tries to run into the forest as soon as the girl stops the car. Grace goes after him and manages to catch him a few meters ahead, promising that if Pete behaves, she will personally take him to the forest to see together where he lives. While the boy is introduced to his temporary family, Gavin and his men get lost in the forest and start wandering aimlessly until they eventually find Elliot's den. Curious, the lumberjack grabs his flashlight and enters the place to investigate, finding Pete's book on the ground. But when he sees the object in Gavin's hand, the dragon gets furious and decides to reveal himself, attacking the humans, who start running desperately to the vehicle. As everyone gets in, one of the loggers starts the car and tries to accelerate as fast as possible, but Elliot lifts the rear of the car, preventing them from leaving the site. Desperate, Gavin reaches for his gun and aims it at the dragon, who snatches the rifle and pulls the human by the barrel of the gun, bending the object as if it were paper. Without weapons, Elliot stops using his invisibility and sneezes on Gavin, who only has time to return to the vehicle before his employees leave in despair. At Grace's house, Pete begins to rediscover civilization while the forest ranger and the sheriff try to understand what happened to him in their investigation. The police find a newspaper clipping about Pete's family accident and confirm that the boy's parents are dead. So it was requested that a social worker would pick him up the next morning to take him to the orphanage. In the farthest part of town, Elliot starts sniffing Pete and follows his trail to the hospital, but the boy has already left and the dragon ends up losing the boy's trail. At this moment, he sees Gavin's truck passing by the road and decides to follow it. The same arrives at Jack's house, where the group of loggers tells about what happened and asks for help to deal with the creature in the forest. Jack doesn't believe the story and refuses to enter the forest at night, leaving his younger brother extremely frustrated. From the stairs, Grace hears Gavin's story and finally understands who Elliot is, about whom Pete talks so much, and decides to go to her father's house to see if she can find out more about the dragon. When she gets there, the woman finds Mitchell and explains everything she has discovered, showing the drawing of the creature that the boy made and seeing that it perfectly matches the features her father had made when she was still a child. Finally believing that Elliot is real, Grace asks her father to tell the story of his encounter with the dragon one last time, but now being completely sure that he is telling the truth. At Jack's house, the dragon arrives outside and hears Pete's voice, finding him apparently happy among humans, which makes him feel betrayed, and flies towards the den, where he spends the night extremely upset. At dawn, Grace decides to take Pete to the police station, but when she sees the social welfare car, the woman decides not to leave him there and decides to fulfill her promise. She picks up her father so they can go together to visit Elliot's den in the forest. At the wood mill, Jack arrives looking for Gavin and discovers that his younger brother took some men and went out on a hunt. Jack receives a call from the sheriff looking for Grace and immediately realizes that she took the boys into the forest. He quickly leaves to find Gavin and his men, who are eager to find the creature. On the other side of the forest, Pete and the others reach the end of the road and start walking to the den, where Mitchell finally has his reunion with the dragon after almost 30 years. Seeing the creature, Natalie is enchanted and approaches almost hypnotized, touching the dragon's snout, which the dragon likes very much. But at this moment Gavin arrives with his men and starts firing tranquilizer darts at Elliot, lassoing him by the neck and leaving the dragon extremely agitated. To defend his friend, Pete grabs a wooden stick and starts hitting the loggers, forcing Gavin to put him on his shoulder and move him away from the commotion. At this moment, Elliot finally decides to flee and starts climbing one of the trees, taking flight into the sky, but the creature is already weakened by the sedatives and crashes down, bringing down the branches and knocking over the trunk that protected his den. With the successful hunt, Gavin goes to the wood mill, where he starts displaying the dragon as if it were a trophy in his office. Jack calls the sheriff to request all the cars in town and asks Natalie to take care of Pete while he tries to talk to his brother. While Jack and Mitchell try to convince Gavin to release the dragon, Grace approaches and touches the creature, causing his fur to change color and start glowing in an emerald green tone, leaving everyone amazed at the phenomenon. At this point, the police arrive at the scene and both Jack and Gavin go out to try to convince the officers that they are right, providing a chance for Pete and Natalie to enter the shed and manage to free Elliot, unlocking the chains. Realizing that the adults are approaching, the girl puts a wooden beam to lock the door and tries to convince the dragon to fly, but as he is very weak, Pete suggests that he remains invisible, making Gavin and the others think that he escaped through the skylight, except Grace, who senses their presence and locks them in there alone. As the men leave, Pete and Natalie start thinking of a way to escape, when Mitchell appears and offers to drive the truck, serving as a getaway driver for the dragon and the children. Grace's father starts the truck and leaves, breaking one of the shed walls and starting to flee in front of everyone. Desperate, Gavin orders his men to chase them and runs towards his car, but Grace takes the keys from his pockets and throws them away, giving Mitchell some time to get away. Still, the vehicles are still chasing them and are requesting the help of some helicopters for the pursuit. Already quite late, Gavin leaves the road and overtakes everyone by the rough terrain, passing by Jack's car and getting closer and closer to the truck. Realizing it's only a matter of time before they're caught, Pete encourages Elliot to fly, and in doing so, the dragon takes off but then crashes, and the weight of the creature dislodges the brake cable, causing hydraulic fluid to leak onto the road. Closing in on the dragon, Gavin overtakes the truck and positions his car to block the bridge, expecting Mitchell to stop when he realizes there's nowhere to go, but thanks to the broken cable, the man can't slow down and decides to do the opposite, flooring it and forcing the loggers to jump to avoid being hit. Upon impact, the truck slows down until it stops working, but as the police are still behind them, Elliot climbs onto the bridge structure and breathes a jet of flame that forces everyone to stop, causing the vehicles to get stuck on the asphalt that begins to give way. Jack and Grace's car, which was in the front, is where the fire damaged, so it starts to fall along with the bridge. Pete then quickly climbs onto the structure to convince his companion to stop, saying that the humans are now also his new family. Gavin gets out of the car and does everything to prevent his brother and sister-in-law from falling into the river, but the vehicle is too heavy, and he can't stop them. At this moment, Elliot jumps from the structure and manages to hold the truck, allowing Jack and Grace to get into the back, but just as the couple is about to get out, the bridge collapses and falls towards the river, taking the dragon and the humans along. Mitchell and the others watch anxiously at the abyss, thinking they're gone, but a few seconds later Elliot emerges from the depths carrying Jack and Grace on his back, leaving everyone relieved. On the other side of the bridge, Gavin realizes he was wrong and decides to leave the dragon alone. Pete runs and hugs his dragon friend, and when some police helicopters appear on the horizon, Pete decides that the best option is to leave riding on Elliot's back, so they head to the forest together. After a long flight, the dragon arrives at his old den and tries to convince the boy to stay there, but Pete says everyone knows this place and advises Elliot to find a new home in the north, where Natalie said was the land of the dragons. As a farewell, the boy reads the book he received from his parents one last time and spends some time hugging his dragon friend. Moments later, he heads to Grace's house. After that day, no one in the town ever saw the creature again. Months later, Pete and his new family travel to the north without anyone knowing, to visit their friend Elliot and his new family of dragons, and reminisce about how great it was to have met each other.